They told you if black boys just worked harder, stayed focused, kept their heads down, they'd make it. They told you the education system was built to lift everyone up, that every child who showed up ready to learn would get a fair shot. But what if the system was never designed to let them through? What if the struggle isn't random at all, but follows a pattern so consistent, so predictable, that it stops looking like failure and starts looking like design? In 1983, a black educator from Chicago published a book with a title so bold it made people uncomfortable. Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu called it Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. And before you could dismiss it, before you could call it exaggeration, he laid out the receipts. He tracked 80 black boys through the same school system, watched them start strong in first grade, excited about learning, confident, performing just as well as everyone else. Then he watched what happened next. By second grade, something shifted. By fifth grade, those same boys were cynical, defeated. Their test scores had dropped. Their love for school had died. And the system called it their fault. Kunjufu didn't buy it because the pattern was too clean, too consistent. If one boy struggles, that's individual. If 10 boys struggle, maybe that's coincidence. But when 80 boys, different personalities, different homes, different strengths, all hit the same wall at the same time, that's not failure, that's filtering. And Kunjufu spent the next 40 years proving it. He wrote over 30 books. He founded a publishing company. He became one of the most important voices in black education history. And when he passed away in April 2025 at 71 years old, his warning was still ringing in the air. Because the conspiracy he exposed 4 decades ago, it's still running. Now picture this. You're a black boy in second grade. Last year, your teacher loved you. She called on you in class. She smiled when you raised your hand. She put your work on the wall. You felt smart. You felt seen. But this year, something's different. Your new teacher watches you more than the other kids. When you move in your seat, she tells you to sit still. When you talk with your friends, she calls it disruptive. When the white boy next to you does the same thing, she calls it energetic. You start to notice she doesn't call on you as much anymore. And when she does, it's not to praise you, it's to correct you. By third grade, you've learned to stay quiet. By fourth grade, you started to believe maybe you're not as smart as you thought. And by fifth grade, you've checked out. You're just waiting for the bell to ring so you can leave. That shift, from engaged to disengaged, from confident to defeated, has a name. Kunjufu called it the fourth grade failure syndrome. And it's not just one study. It's been documented again and again. In Prince George's County, Maryland, researchers tracked black boys through elementary school in the early 90s. In first and second grade, these boys scored just as well as everyone else on standardized math and reading tests. But by fourth grade, their scores dropped sharply. Not because they suddenly got less intelligent, but because something in the system stopped working for them. And here's the thing that makes it so insidious. Fourth grade is when schools stop teaching kids how to read and start expecting them to read to learn. If you haven't mastered reading by then, every subject after that becomes harder. You fall behind in science because you can't read the textbook. You fall behind in social studies because you can't keep up with the assignments. And the school doesn't ask what went wrong. It just labels you. Slow learner, behavioral problem, at risk. And here's where the pattern gets darker. Because once you're labeled, the system has a place for you, a track. And that track doesn't lead to college. It leads to control, special education classrooms, in-school suspension, alternative schools. And if you keep pushing back, if you keep questioning why you're being treated differently, the system has a final answer: the police. But hold that thought for a second. By the way, if you want more hidden stories like this, subscribe to Black Stories Untold. Now, back to the video. Let's talk about the numbers. Because the conspiracy Kunjufu described isn't hidden anymore. It's right there in the data if you know where to look. Black boys make up less than 8% of all students in America, but they represent 15% of in-school suspensions, 18% of out-of-school suspensions, 18% of expulsions, and it starts early. In preschool, black boys are 9% of enrollment, but 23% of suspensions. Let that sink in. We're talking about 4-year-olds.
And before you say maybe they're just misbehaving more, the research checked that. Studies found that Black students are punished more harshly than white students for the exact same behaviors. When researchers controlled for everything, behavior, grades, family background, they found that 46% of the discipline gap came from how teachers and administrators treated Black boys differently. Only 9% came from actual behavioral differences. 9%. The rest was bias. The rest was the system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Now here's where it connects. Once a Black boy gets suspended, his chances of dropping out double. And if he drops out, his chances of ending up in the criminal justice system multiply by 8. That's not coincidence. That's a pipeline. And the entry point isn't the streets. It's the classroom. It's the moment a teacher looks at a Black boy and sees a threat instead of a child. It's the moment a school brings in police officers to handle discipline instead of counselors. And they did bring in police. After Columbine in 1999, the federal government started handing out grants to put cops in schools. By 2018, more than 40% of schools had security staff on campus at least once a week. And you know what happened? Discipline incidents went up 21%. Because when you put police in schools, student misbehavior stops being a teaching moment and starts being a crime. Black boys started getting arrested for talking back, for being late, for dress code violations. Things that used to get you sent to the principal's office now get you handcuffs. And once you have an arrest on your record as a teenager, your chances of finishing school drop by a quarter. One arrest, one mistake, one moment of being treated like a criminal instead of a kid, and your path is set. Kunjufu saw this coming in 1983. He didn't have all the data we have now, but he had the pattern. And he knew the pattern wasn't an accident. He called it a conspiracy, not because there were people in a back room planning it out step by step, but because the system itself was structured to produce this outcome. It didn't need a master planner. It just needed people to follow the rules. Teachers who believed Black boys were naturally more aggressive. Administrators who saw suspension as the easiest solution. Policymakers who funded prisons faster than schools. It didn't need to be intentional. It just needed to be normal. And that's the scariest part. Because when destruction is normal, people stop seeing it. They stop questioning it. They just call it the way things are. And this is where everything connects. Because the 4th grade failure syndrome isn't just about reading scores. It's the moment the system decides which children get nurtured and which children get managed. And Black boys, over and over, get managed. They get pushed towards sports instead of science. They get told they're good with their hands instead of good with their minds. They get directed away from advanced classes and toward vocational training. And when they resist, when they push back, when they refuse to accept being limited, the system doesn't adjust. It punishes. It removes. It contains. Kunjufu watched this happen for decades. He saw generation after generation of Black boys enter school with hope and leave with trauma. And he kept asking the same question. Where are the Black men who could show these boys another way? Because here's another piece of the pattern. Less than 2% of teachers in America are Black men. 2%. That means most Black boys go through their entire school experience without ever seeing a Black man in a position of authority who isn't a coach or a security guard. They don't see Black male teachers. They don't see Black male principals. They don't see men who look like them leading classrooms, teaching history, explaining math, nurturing minds. And research shows that matters. When Black students have Black teachers, they're less likely to be suspended, less likely to be placed in special education, more likely to graduate, more likely to go to college. The presence of one Black male teacher can change a child's entire trajectory. But the system graduated thousands of Black male teachers after Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, and then pushed most of them out when Black schools closed and white schools didn't want them. The pipeline that could have saved Black boys was destroyed 50 years before Kunjufu even wrote his book. So when people ask why Black boys struggle in school, Kunjufu's answer was simple. They don't. The school struggles with them. The curriculum doesn't reflect their history. The teaching styles don't match how they learn. The discipline systems don't account for how they're socialized. The role models aren't there. The expectations are low. And when they succeed anyway, when they beat the odds and prove everyone wrong, the system doesn't celebrate them. It calls them exceptions. It treats their success as proof the system works, instead of proof the system failed everyone else. And that's the final piece of the conspiracy. Even the ones who make it through are used as weapons against the ones who don't. See, if he can do it, why can't you? As if surviving a system designed to break you is the standard instead of the tragedy. Kunjufu didn't just write about this, he built solutions. He worked with schools to recruit Black male teachers. He developed curriculums that centered Black history and culture. He trained educators to recognize their own biases. He pushed for early intervention programs that caught boys before 4th grade, before the system had labeled them as failures. He advocated for rites of passage programs that gave Black boys a sense of identity and purpose outside of what school told them they were worth. He called for communities to restore the village mentality, where every adult took responsibility for every child, not just their own. And some of it worked. In places where his strategies were implemented, boys thrived. But the system never adopted those solutions at scale, because solving the problem would require admitting the problem was never the boys. It was always the system. And here's the grand payoff that connects all of this. The most dangerous part of Kunjufu's work isn't that he documented how Black boys struggle. It's that he proved the struggle is structural. It's not about individual teachers being mean. It's not about parents not caring. It's not even about resources, though those matter. It's about a system that was built during segregation, that was designed to separate and rank children by race, and that never fully changed even after the laws did. The mechanisms are still there. The labels are still there. The lower expectations are still there. The harsher discipline is still there. The absence of Black male role models is still there. And the pipeline from classroom to prison is still there. Kunjufu didn't discover a conspiracy, he uncovered a machine. A machine that takes bright-eyed 6-year-olds and sorts them, nurtures some, manages others. And by the time they're 10 years old, the machine has already decided who gets a future and who gets a cell. That's why his work terrified people, not because it was radical, but because it was true. And if it's true, if the crisis really does start at a desk in 2nd grade, if the destruction really is preventable, if the system really is designed this way, then every year we do nothing, we're complicit. Every 4th grader who loses hope, every suspension that didn't need to happen, every Black boy who gets pushed out instead of lifted up, that's not failure. That's the machine working exactly as intended. And the only thing more disturbing than the conspiracy Kunjufu exposed is that 40 years later, we're still acting like we don't see it. Jawanza Kunjufu spent his life countering that conspiracy. He armed parents with knowledge. He trained teachers with tools. He gave boys permission to see themselves as more than what the system said they were. And when he passed this year, he left behind a roadmap, not for saving Black boys from themselves, but for saving them from a system that never wanted them to win in the first place. This was Black Stories Untold, and as always, thanks for watching. If you want more stories like this, click the video on your screen now.